Hello friends, I made this for. My name is Lauren, and today I'm going to talk to you about my spiritual beliefs. So if you've never been here before, hi, hello, thanks for clicking on this. I don't know why you would care what I think or why. But if you have been here before, you've seen a lot of my toxic spirituality videos, things like that. I thought it would be kind of important to share some facts about my belief system as it is now. After getting out of a cult, after being raised Christian and finding spirituality, declaring myself a queer witch, things like that. Like, why? What do I believe and why? Because I've said many times what I don't believe. And that's really great and all, but what do I have? Well, buckle up and let's talk about it. Get comfy, grab your coffee. I have a new shelf in the background now with a new lamp. It's very cool for me. But anyway, let's get into it. Hi, hello. I like using tarot and astrology. I like using candle magic. I use art as ritual. I do a lot of these things. And I also believe in God. So I also believe that God can be seen as the universal force, maybe spirit, all of these things. I personally believe all roads, be they virtuous, kind, caring, and about taking care of each other and really focusing on how to follow a virtuous path, bring us all home to God. I know a lot of spiritual people don't use the term God. I do. I believe in God. I say that quite a bit outside of this space. But I also believe God can be called spirit. And God can be called the universe. God can be called many different things. Shiva, Christ, Allah, all of that. It's really about what works for you and your specific relationship. I think that comes from growing up in the Christian church, and even though I do have some religious trauma, it's certainly not as much as other people that I know who have been in religious cults or totally harmed by family that has rejected them because of the belief systems that they hold, right? Like, for example, a lot of Christian parents are not chill with their kids being queer. I've seen many families get broken up because of that. I've seen a lot of queer kids be harmed by those sort of ideologies, right? So I didn't have that. When I did come out to my mother and explain to her I was queer, she accepted me, though I'm pretty sure she's still not certain whether or not being queer is a sin. I grew up very religious, really loving the stories of Jesus, but as I became an adult, I just saw so much happening that did not resonate as the love of Jesus Christ. So I decided that it wasn't necessarily for me. Of course, I became an atheist before I became an agnostic, before I am at where I'm at. Now, you might be saying, Lauren, how can you believe in God and use tarot and astrology? Well, honey bun, that's not to say that these aren't other ways of speaking to God. Whoever said that pulling tarot cards is not a way to channel spirit, to connect with God, to kind of hone in and just listen, right? I think in religious spaces, sometimes there's like this idea that God has to be in this certain way and do this certain thing, and God expects a certain something. And after a certain amount of time, I just kind of started to believe that all of that sounded pretty limiting for God. So for me, astrology, tarot, it doesn't negate the reality of God. It's just a different way to connect with God. Now, that's kind of an odd thing, I think, for most people, because you either have a spiritual path that's religious, or you have a spiritual path that's New Age, at least right now. But I think also more of us are in betwixt. More of us are in the middle of both of those polarities and really just trying to find, what does connection to God look like? Is there even a God? Is it just nature? Like, I have so many friends who, for them, the closest thing to God is connecting with nature. And who's to say that that's wrong either? I think one of the words that comes to me when I think about my personal spirituality and my beliefs is just evolving and acknowledging that where I'm at right now might not be where I'm at a few years from now. And also acknowledging that there's so much beauty in the unknown when it comes to relating with God. I don't have to have it figured out. I don't need to know what the real path of God is for me. I can simply exist and find connection where I'm at in the liminal space, in the different places that I go, I'm drawn to, all of those things. Of course, after being in a spiritual coaching cult for over a year, after getting out of that, being bombarded with some really weird toxic Christianity, I will have to say this. I really was at a point where I was really ready to turn my back on God and just say this is all bullshit. But after sitting with that, I feel even more of a deeper connection, even more solid in my belief system, and feeling really good with not knowing anything. And I think that's where more of us have found ourselves or need to find ourselves. There's something about this idea of the black and whiteness when it comes to religion or spirituality that makes it really hard to exist in a world that's not black and white. Everything is nuance. You can find the devil, you can find God, you can find these things if you're looking for them anywhere. But on that note, I want to mention this. I believe in God, but I don't believe in the devil. I don't believe in hell, and I don't believe in sin. Surprise, surprise, I believe that these concepts are just used to control behaviors and to make us undoubtedly do things a certain way. Why is that? Because the concept of what is sin has actually changed quite a bit over the years. In fact, evangelicals were on the front lines of saying that schools shouldn't be integrated. Why? Because God put us all on different continents and didn't want us mixing. Since then, that has been pretty much dropped from the evangelical script. But who's to say that that won't change when it comes to gay rights one day? Everything changes because ultimately, I think people recognize there's either getting things so fundamentally like pure, and then there's just bringing people into the fold of God's love and telling people that their natural inclinations to just love another adult person that's the same sex as them is just as problematic as saying to someone you shouldn't be race mixing. Ultimately, two consenting adults can decide for themselves and no one is getting hurt. Which brings me to another reason why I personally left Christianity and definitely won't be going back. The idea that you need God to be moral is fundamentally flawed. I know what's moral, and yes, I grew up in the church, but I'm not fixated by my morals because of the church. I left the church because of my morals. So, I don't know, man. It's just me. Another thing that I want to kind of speak on is in both Christianity and New Age spirituality, there is a lot of thought control. And that's why I don't adhere to either. there is this idea, and I've talked about this before, in spirituality, in this New Age sphere, that you have to avoid becoming low vibration. You've got to avoid sad feelings because they're toxic. You have to avoid toxic food, right? This idea of low vibration actually is a pattern of thought control. I didn't realize that until I got out of my cult. But surprise, surprise, friends, saying that you can't think about certain things or ingest certain things or be afraid of these things because ultimately they will lower your vibration, that's fucking thought control. And it exists in Christianity as well. The idea that you don't want to watch something, and you don't want to watch Hocus Pocus 2 or anything that would cause you to sin, or you have to really protect yourself and your children from the homosexual agenda because it will corrupt your children, is thought control, and is not very different at all from the concept of low vibration. The idea of living a life that is without sin and a life that is high vibration, they're the same picture. They're the same idea. And the idea is you limit what you intake and what you think or do because you're afraid of how it will affect your immortal soul, right? I didn't really get to thinking about this until I've been really unpacking my toxic spirituality and toxic Christianity. So those are some of my beliefs. Those are some of the reasons why I believe what I believe, outside of the fact that I just found a lot of things that are a little icky. But where do I go from here? What do I do, you know? So right now, where I'm at with my spirituality, and my husband is right there with me. Right before our wedding, we did a lot of classes with the woman who was marrying us, our pastor. I loved doing the homework because it really had us reflect and talk about our spiritual futures and talk about what we imagined for ourselves and children as we both grew up in the church. At one point, I was really talking with my husband about if we have kids, joining a church and having them go to church with us so that they would have that spiritual community like we did. We really were talking about having that connection and having a spiritual community of worship, of loving God, and helping to build that within a church community. Of course, nowadays, I don't know if that's going to be the case. After getting out of this toxic cult and experiencing some weirdness, who really knows? I know that part of me was really feeling into it, and maybe I will again in the future, say things change. But as a queer witch, I don't know if I would want my kids hearing things like your mommy's going to hell, because I don't believe in it. But yeah, that's my thoughts on spirituality, my spirituality personally, and I would love to know about yours. I use crystals, I use candle magic, I use candles to pray. I think all of these things just make me closer to God, and I believe in God. But I think all of us have our own paths and our own relationships with God that are very valid, special, beautiful, and unique. So let me know down below. What does your relationship with God, spirit, universe, whatever look like? And until then, I'll see you next time, friends. Bye-bye.